It's all alert. Whether you get an erection from the book or not, I don't know. To be quite honest, I felt emasculated. We'll talk about this book and your handwriting and the fact that it tells a great deal about your sexuality or your lack of it in just a moment. We'll also talk to more people about the Phoenix Festival, how it's going in Stratford-on-Avon, the greatest pop festival perhaps, they say, for this weekend. After all, there seems to be pop and rock festivals, and with Donington coming up very shortly, an awful lot more happening just about every weekend. And, of course, live therapy. But our prime subject tonight is the whole issue of recreational drugs. So far we haven't covered, but we've discussed and opened the discussion on the issue of whether drugs should be legalized, exactly what kind of damage it does to you, the kind of person who becomes addicted. Our telephone calls are coming in fairly thick and fast at the moment. If you want to fax us or if you want to call us, then our number will turn up at the bottom of your screen. It is as simple as that. There's a kind of book, isn't there, that is good fun to play with at parties, but I came across this book only recently, having read the author's previous book about 4 years ago, which was Graphology, and that's when the first time I ever took Graphology seriously. The whole office absolutely paranoid about whether or not we were displaying too much in our signatures. Michael Watts, The Naked Hand, we'll talk about in just a minute. Graphology is a serious art because you actually make a living at it, don't you? You're not a nutter, is what I'm saying.
I would say I'm sort of averagely to more than averagely neurotic, but I think that gives one a greater understanding of the various problems and neuroses that afflict most of this society. But graphology is a very serious discipline, and in the right hands it can give a very accurate portrait of personality and behaviour. I
can see at certain times a pressure when you literally put more pressure on the pen, yes. But we'll talk about the business of graphology in a minute. Let me find more about you, because psychiatry is your speciality, isn't it? Psychology. I studied experimental psychology. Well, psychology is more the study of more normal abnormal behaviour, whereas psychiatry you're getting into extremes of abnormality that perhaps don't afflict the masses, whereas psychological problems afflict all of us. So psychology comes first. Where did the interest in graphology come from? The interest in graphology came from early childhood, because a good friend of my father's was a graphologist in Switzerland, and she's actually been a graphologist now for some 50 years. So, was she the mentor? No, she wasn't, because unfortunately when I went over there with the hope of studying with her, we didn't agree with one another on many levels. Now, you're a fairly strong sort of character, so I can imagine that it might be quite easy to disagree with you. Yes, I think so, but at the time also another reason I wasn't taken on was because the focus of my attention was not sufficient really at that time. I was still very young. But I studied with a gentleman who was a question document examiner in America in the Supreme Courts of California, and he was also a very proficient graphologist. I spent a year with him, and I've been doing this for 15 years now. Is it mumbo-jumbo? It is not at all mumbo-jumbo. It actually falls within the realm of, you could say, it falls within the realm of body language, because it's well accepted within the field of psychology that our gestures and movements are very revealing about our personality. Right, stop dead now, because look at your body language as opposed to mine. Yes. You're like that. My body language is like that. Yes. I'm much more open than you are. You're very closed as a person, aren't you? Well, I think that you're much more used to being on television than I am, and I think that there's a degree of nervousness in me at the moment that is sort of rigidifying my body language. But do you find me intimidating? Not at all, not at all. That's good. In that case, let's pursue the subject on the book then. What can your handwriting tell you about me? What can your handwriting tell you? Right. Well, if I saw a sample of your handwriting, I could answer that more clearly. But handwriting can reveal a great deal about our inner emotional state. It can reveal a great deal about how we communicate with other people. It gives a lot of information about our sexuality, and it gives a great deal of information about the inner conflicts that we're having to deal with moment by moment. So it covers a broad spectrum. For example, I'm not going to ask you to judge this. Yes. At the moment I made these notes, that is that my feelings. For a moment, don't reveal all. But I was scribbling during the program, and that could tell you what I felt then. But would it tell you what I felt now? Well, when you analyse writing, you look at the formal script. You don't look at hurriedly written notes. And what this tells me, this is just a hurriedly written note. And for instance, one little point, the crosses on your T's are well to the right of the stem, which is showing a tremendous desire to move on, a tremendous inner impatience. You're thinking several steps ahead, and it also shows you're working under a great deal of pressure at the moment. Well, I'm not sure about the pressure, but you're absolutely right, because I think I was very bored with a commercial break at that particular moment. Right, now let us talk about The Naked Hand. You actually link graphology to one's sexuality, to one's sense of sex. Yes. That's not a very easy leap to make, is it?
Well, I think we're sexual beings. I think sexuality is the root of is the root motivation behind the human species, because I think one main motive in human beings is, at the end of the day, to recreate themselves, to continue the production of the species. So sexuality is our strongest impulse, and many of the neuroses that people suffer from have their root in disturbed sexual behavior patterns. So sexuality is the driving force behind human beings.
So the driving force is sexuality, but sexuality, of course, includes love, passion, it includes aggression, affection. I've read the book, I read it last night. It's quite fascinating. It goes through all those emotions, and they seem, to someone who doesn't understand the science, it seems an enormous amount to expect that one simple piece of script can possibly define those.
That's why the only way to explain graphology to people is to actually do an analysis. And I've actually got a couple of people who have given me their writing, Gary and also George, who was sitting there a little earlier.
Who's vanished now, I notice.
Yes. But I would be happy to sort of start to go ahead with Gary, and we can see his reactions.
Gary, very briskly.
Well, to begin with, he's a very honest gentleman. You can be absolutely certain that if he disagrees with anything that I'm saying, he will let us know. To begin with, Gary's got a very clear, systematic manner of thinking, and is extremely sceptical towards any new ideas unless he's fully satisfied they're grounded on solid facts. He welcomes challenges, and when his eyes are set upon a goal, he's fueled by an incredible intensity of emotion and powerful determination.
Slowly. Intensity of emotion. Are you very emotional?
Yeah, I would say I am.
But you're very quiet, aren't you? You're deliberately, you pull that
I'm
back.
in a TV studio, which I've never been before. And
are you the kind of person who pounds the desk if he doesn't get his own way?
No, I don't. I'm very conscious about not doing those kinds of things, but I do often feel like doing those kinds of things.
Okay, because actually you say he's very quiet, and my next sentence was, his brain is rarely, if ever, quiet, as he's continually subjecting his environment to intense analysis, which also makes him a very, very skillful problem solver. And in relationship, he can exhibit a very quarrelsome streak if his partner attempts to stand in the way of his plans.
Hold on one second, because any more than that I think is a bit unfair. Is your partner watching at the moment?
I don't have a partner, I just have a daughter.
Oh, right. The daughter matters a great deal, of course. Do you recognise yourself in all that?
I think it's actually very accurate. There was one piece at the very beginning. Would you mind just repeating the very first couple of sentences?
Okay. Clear, systematic manner of thinking and extremely sceptical attitude towards any new ideas unless you're satisfied they're fully grounded upon solid facts.
That's the only bit I wouldn't agree with. Yes. I think I'm quite open-minded, and I do take on or have a good look at new ideas without them necessarily needing to be based in fact, solid.
But looking at new ideas and accepting them are two different matters.
That's a good point.
You're prepared, sorry.
Let me take a break on this, because the book is fascinating. It's called The Naked Hand. We'll discuss it in more detail when we come back here on Michael Watts is with us. The Naked Lunch, sexuality revealed through handwriting. Now, I'm going to stop you dead, because I don't want you to say any more about Gary, mainly because I want Gary to stay here for the next couple of hours. But there is a point. Let me, if I can show you a page from the book like that. There we go. As you can see, there are squiggles all over the place. The squiggles are the kind of doodles that one does, and we have a few doodles here and some sketches that have been sent in by fax. I cannot believe that in moments in meetings, or in moments when you're idly going, as I tend to do, and I have a standard doodle I do, which is a face like that. That's a doodle I do when either I'm bored or I'm trying to think of something else. I cannot believe that that tells you much about my sexuality.
Well, I've actually only homed in on doodles which do tell you about sexuality, and a face like that wouldn't. But
that's interesting. Do you mean I have no sexuality at all because I've looked through this and I don't do any of your little sketches?
Yes, because that simply means you're not revealing aspects of your sexuality.
I'm a dark and sinister character, you mean? A threat to every woman?
Maybe you're completely satisfied on the sexual level and there's no inner frustrations emerging through your doodles, or maybe it only shows in your handwriting.
So the handwriting can also tell you.
The handwriting will always reveal a great deal about sexuality. Doodles won't necessarily do that. The doodle section is very accurate in places, but it was put in more for a little fun and light-hearted enjoyment. It's not to be taken as seriously as the graphology in the book. Incidentally, may I interrupt one thing? Are you feeling hungry by any chance? Because you actually said the naked lunch when it's called The Naked Hand, and I'm deducing from that you may be thinking
it's the first masturbatory fantasy I had when I was at school, in actual fact. The Naked Hand, of course, you're absolutely right. Though I suppose the Naked Lunch could have done. Janet, cover your ears, because this conversation is getting extremely seedy. I'm delighted to say it is, after all, 11:15. Michael, look, the whole issue of sexuality. Can you, for example, not tell, because tell is asking too much, but could you perhaps speculate on someone's sexual preference from their handwriting?
Yes, it's possible to do that. I've actually devoted a whole chapter on the area of homosexuality. It's rather more complex than many other areas of the writing, and I won't go into any detail about how one analyzes script to determine sexual preferences, because I think it's necessary that anyone buying the book studies that section very carefully so that there's no chance of making errors when
Well, you see, this is why I wondered about the morality. It's a good punt for the book, I've got to say. But I read that and I thought, my God, hang on a second. Your chapter is entitled on page 205, I Wonder, Straight or Gay? And I had this fairly frivolous idea that perhaps hundreds of people are going to go out and buy your book, which is great fun to read, are going to write their handwriting down and say, aha, okay, so sloped T's, eh? Well, we all know what that means.
Well, the thing is, if you look at this chapter, there are only 4 signs which on their own may suggest homosexual inclinations in the personality. There's a second group, which is minor signs, where you have to see at least 3 characteristics in the writing before you can deduce the possibility of homosexual tendencies. And I make it quite clear that just because a writing shows homosexual tendencies, it does not mean that the person is homosexually active. So I don't think there's any room for error if one follows this chapter very carefully. And also, it's useful to realize that every human being has both a male and female side to their personality. So sometimes, where you're seeing signs of possible homosexuality, what we may be dealing with is simply the anima, as Jung calls it. The female side of the male psyche may be unusually active, and the person may lead an absolutely heterosexual life and feel no homosexual impulses, but he may have an extraordinarily strong feminine sensitivity that will give him a great understanding of his partner and also give him a greater acceptance of both males and females in general.
Michael, you're a powerful fella because you work for a lot of industrialists, a lot of large corporations, and you advise them. When the applicant comes in for a job and has to give a piece of handwritten evidence to you, does he know he's going to be graphologized?
He should do. That's really up to the integrity of the company. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies, when they put in advertisements, the way I usually work is a company puts in an advert for a particular position. Then, instead of having to interview perhaps 100 replies, I will go through those 100 handwriting samples and pick out 3 who would be most suited to the job. And they would interview those 3 first. And assuming they find the person they're looking for, the situation would go no further. If not, I would then pick out another 3 who perhaps would be suitable for the job.
What's your success rate?
I would say around 80 to 90% success on that.
So I read your first book about 4 years ago, which, as I said, I sent the office a buzzing. You've now done this, The Naked Hand.
Yes.
Get that right. You've done The Naked Hand. Why? Why didn't you stay as a backroom boy and a shadowy figure, sort of CIA fixer?
I'll tell you exactly why. Because Headline Publishing contacted my agent, and then they wrote a letter to me, and they actually wrote out like a recipe of a particular type of book that they wanted. And I couldn't bring myself to turn the offer down, so I followed
What, on financial terms or artistic and creative?
Both. And also, in the process of researching this book, I've improved my graphological ability, not in the area of personnel selection, but in the area of personality portraits. I've now developed a much greater understanding. So I saw it as a work of research and simultaneously a very nice book contract.
I don't want to make things difficult for you, but do you, so therefore I'm not going to ask you to define these people in the terms that you would normally do. Yes. However, we have a couple of little doodles which interested me, and I don't know whether they mean anything. There's a lady called Julie who's faxed this in from London.
Yes.
It's a star. Let me hold it up to the camera. A star, and those are kisses, so I guess you can take those kisses as read. Does the star mean anything?
Well, the star, as I said, doesn't feature in the chapter on sexual doodles. I notice here you have a smiling face.
This is from Tony.
And it's just a little short snippet. Smiling face suggests a person is sexually contented in a satisfying relationship, and it also suggests there will be a strong sense of humour within the realm of their sexual activities. So both in relationship and in lovemaking, they're likely to introduce a strong element of humour. And I notice also from this writing that the extensions of the lower zone letters are
lower cap, is that?
Yes, if you're looking at particularly letter G, it is considered to be a main sexual letter, and if you look at the stem on the letter G, it's probably around 5 or 6 times the height of the central area of the writing, the vowel area. Where you see that, you have enormous sexual vitality. These loops are not closed, though. So
Tony, good luck. I mean, things are looking good, yeah.
Yes, but the loops are not closed, and they're drawn to the left, which suggests that there's a great deal of frustration also in that area. And there seems to be an obsession with the past in this personality. This person also has an incredible love of books, I see, and also a need to achieve a position of great respect. They've got great showmanship. And I think this person is not content to take backstage. So in party situations, I would imagine you would immediately notice them if you walked into a room.
Look, you're being very generous. Have a quick look at that. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that this is the writing of, hang on a second, Julie.
Okay. This writing shows an extraordinarily vivid imagination on all levels, including the sexual level. This is someone who expects a partner to be incredibly spontaneous and inventive in lovemaking. There's also a great deal of sexual vitality here. But on the negative side, I would think that Julie might find it difficult to avoid getting bored rather sooner than the average person with a partner in a long-term relationship. In other words, after several years, she is more likely to find their sexual repertoire a little more boring than perhaps someone with less vivid imagination.
She'll swing from the ceiling every night?
Well, I think that there's an unlimited sexual fantasy here, and I think as long as it remains within the realm of non-perverted activity, anything will go.
Thank you very much indeed. Now look, how do we know? You see, this is all based, isn't it, on your skill, your interpretation, your understanding, and that's experience, but how do we know you're right?
Because I've subjected all the information I've given in this book to around 15 years of research, and I've also done thousands upon thousands of analyses with feedback. A lot of graphologists are totally obsessed with the side of personnel selection. They never get feedback from the people they analyze, only the companies get the information. I've done thousands of personality portraits and had direct feedback. In the early years, I was making large numbers of errors, and since about the last 10 years, I've found that I've been spot on accurate 90% of the time.
Are you a very positive man, or are you obsessive?
Obsessive, compulsive, neurotic.
All four?
Yep, I'm a classic obsessive, compulsive, neurotic. I have repetitive behavior patterns, and I suffer from anxiety. I used to have, my hands used to sweat a lot years ago. I've sort of, relatively speaking, I've calmed down enormously.
Do you have a partner?
Yes, I've been married 15 years.
Is she very tolerant?
Very, very tolerant, but we're both understanding of one another. She has great insight into human nature, as I also do, and she's highly intuitive, and she's got a tremendous capacity to forgive faults. So
fascinating man. That, you must come back again. Michael Watts, the book is great fun. Now, I don't mean that rudely to Michael. It's one of those reads where you can really enjoy plunging into it and seeing what you find. It's also not necessary to read it from page 1 to page 364 to get it right. It's called The Naked Hand, bless its cotton socks, Sexuality Revealed Through Handwriting, and it's by Michael Watts. Michael will return, not tonight, because the poor man's got to get back to his bed, but he will return at some stage in the future on a Sunday night, and we'll give everybody a chance to send in their handwriting. Actually, poor old Gary was sitting there going grey for a minute. It was a pretty accurate, not totally accurate, I hasten to add, but it was a pretty accurate one-off, wasn't it?
I thought it was, yeah. Because he actually had written more that we discussed just before we came.
Well, I didn't want to get into it because God knows how deep we were going to get into your psyche, and that's what worried me.
No, I would have been all right with what he'd written, yeah.
Oh, well, that's good.